Hello and welcome to another episode of the Real EFL Preview Show. This is the show where we look back at the news over the last week from the Football League and we look ahead to three key fixtures across all three tiers. Now, before we get started, please don't forget to like this video, if indeed you do like it, and subscribe to the channel for more great EFL content. I am here every single week through until the end of the season, and joining me this week, as he does every single week, is our resident EFL expert, Kyle Keneally. How have you been, Kyle?
I've been good, thank you. It's been a fairly busy week in terms of just getting across all the transfers and managerial changes, although there haven't actually been as many this week, to be fair. But I was last night looking through a lot about Sheffield Wednesday and Chancery there, which was I want to say entertaining, but it's perhaps not the right word to use. It is horrible in terms of what was said last night and just how poorly he seems to be running the club at the moment. But it is entertaining for probably every other fan, including Sheffield United fans watching it, and particularly the fact that Shay Charles was recalled late last night when he popped out and took a phone call literally at the last minute for him to be recalled. And now Sheffield United are supposedly interested in bringing him for the second half of the season. It is the beauty of Hillsborough and everything that goes on when Chancery is involved.
Yeah, it's awful, isn't it? It's like when you're driving down a motorway and you see an accident on the other side of the road. You know it's not nice, but you can't help but look. And unfortunately, I think that's been Sheffield Wednesday for a very long while. And there was a story, I won't say who told me it, but about a certain Football League manager who went for an interview with Chancery. And halfway through the interview, Chancery said to this manager, "Right, it's time for you to talk now to my advisor." And he turned the phone around and his 15-year-old nephew was on the other side of the phone on the in the interview. So, yeah, I feel for Sheffield Wednesday because people of a certain age, myself 46, remember Sheffield Wednesday as a first division team, as being FA Cup semi-finalists, being in the League Cup final with players like David Hurst and Roland Nilsson and Chris Waddle and Trevor Francis. They were a powerhouse of the English game, and they still could be now. It's a fine old ground. The away end perhaps not quite fit for purpose, but Chancery has turned them into something of a laughingstock. And every time you think that they've turned a corner, they get promoted, or they've got a good manager there in Danny Roll. Somehow the chairman manages to put the boot in, and it's actually a surprise to me that they've managed to hold on for their manager. To their manager for as long as they have, given his quality, given what he's having to work under, and the fact that he keeps achieving with them. So fair play to him. But yeah, feel really sorry for Sheffield Wednesday fans. Jumping straight into other news, of course, it seems we always have a manager change to discuss, and it might not be at Hillsborough, but this week it is at Adams Park, right on the edge of the Chilterns, whereas Matt Bloomfield has flown the nest. So after taking Wycombe to the EFL Trophy final, guiding into the automatic promotion spots in League One this season, he's taken over at Championship strugglers Luton Town. Now, this was a bit of a surprise, if I'm honest, to me, Matt Bloomfield going to Luton, given the styles of football, and there seems to be quite a contrast. What do you make of this move, Kyle?
Yeah, likewise, I'm quite surprised. There was a bit of talk about some of the other jobs that he'd been linked with. I think Coventry might have been in there, and he hadn't gone. And then to move to Luton, and this is no disrespect to Luton at all, but you look at the positioning of both sides. You've got a Wycombe side flying, looking to get back to the Championship again, and you look at the stature of the club and how their history has been. This hasn't been a level that the Wycombe tend to compete at. So the fact that they're in a position where they're looking to get back into the second tier is huge. And then you look at Luton. All right, they got promoted, but they were relegated last season. They're struggling really at the moment in the Championship. They're only a couple of points above the bottom three. So it does feel like a massive surprise, in all honesty. I saw a stat as well. I love little bits like this and little stats like this. That it was the first time since 2003 on Saturday when they played Mansfield that a Wycombe game will not involve Gareth Ainsworth or Matt Bloomfield. So it feels like a massive part of everything that involves Wycombe has just been stripped away, I guess. I know Ainsworth went a fair amount of time ago now, but Matt Bloomfield has pretty much been a constant throughout, playing over 550 games. He's managed over 100. Feels a relatively short spell, but he's achieved a fair amount, as you say, with the EFL Trophy there and getting to the final. The end to last season that they had, when I think they went a little bit under the radar because they didn't quite get to a point where they were involved in the playoff conversation as such. But this season they've been excellent, and in all honesty, now I do feel that this will derail their promotion aspirations for the season.
Yeah, I've seen there's already talk of Luton potentially going back for Richard Kone over the transfer window as well. I mean, if he was to go, we've seen Wickham firsthand. We know that front three was dangerous, but Kone in particular was really dangerous. I mean, it could be a real double whammy for Wickham, couldn't it, losing manager and player?
Yeah, definitely. A lot's been made as well of the takeover there and everything that's gone on in terms of the fact that there is this difference now, and it feels like, as I just said then, about the fact that they're kind of going away from the old identity a bit, and I think a couple of the players have been linked with in the signing so far. It just feels very, very different from the old Wickham, and I don't know how they're going to cope with this, to be honest. And when we'll come on to in a minute, the teams below them that are looking to catch them, it does feel that they've got a massive job on their hands to stay in touch with Birmingham and keep up with the likes of Wrexham and Huddersfield and try and maintain a promotion push, which was against all odds in fairness anyway, but now has been made that little bit, that massive bit harder by losing their manager.
Yeah, I mean, to be fair, Wickham have, my sources tell me they have spent quite big this summer, and they have attracted some players that perhaps they've paid a little bit over the odds for. The likes of Alex Hartridge at Exeter City went there. I mean, he was a free agent, but there was other League One clubs interested, and Wickham have blown them out of the water. But that's only the same as Bristol Rovers and Burton Albion. It's a boom or bust season before any SCMP changes come in or the independent regulator come in. Now, if the independent regulator did come in, and we're kind of sticking with a Luton Town theme here, he might be having a little bit of a look at Huddersfield Town. Now, Birmingham City, you can understand them spending the money that they have. Huddersfield certainly spent big over the summer, bringing in the likes of Lasse Sorensen, and they are doing the same again now. So this week, Luton sold them striker Joe Taylor for a reported £3 million. This is a player who's had 6 good months in League Two and 6 good months in League One, and then 6 months where he's barely kicked a ball. £3 million, the going rate apparently for Joe Taylor. And then this week, middle of this week, they've also signed Dion Charles from Bolton. That's a reported £750,000, which means Bolton break even on Dion Charles, who's been in and out of their side this season. So you're talking almost £4 million on 2 strikers. Huddersfield have been shot shy. Will this give them the push to get them over the line in the automatic promotion race?
I definitely feel so. I think I mentioned a couple of weeks ago, talking about not necessarily Wickham, but in terms of trying to catch up to Wrexham, and the fact that this has never been anything on Wrexham, but I just felt that the times I've watched them this season, they hadn't always been particularly great, and I did feel they were going to fall off at some point. And when you've got Huddersfield signing the calibre of players like this, it does make me think that even more. When you look at Joe Taylor, you said then about the lack of game time he's had this season. It's 13 games, which sounds a decent amount. 145 minutes of football he's played in the Championship this season for Luton, which does feel really surprising given their season. And I'm quite surprised. I don't know if there was any pre-agreement in terms of him going to Huddersfield before the January transfer window, but it does feel a bit of a surprise that they haven't kept hold of him and given new manager a chance to have a look. But yeah, you look at his minutes, even recently, 16 minutes in the last 4 games that he played. He was quite literally coming on for 6 minutes, for 4 minutes, for a couple of minutes here and there. So he is not. If you look at players that you wanted to bring in, he's the complete opposite to Dion Charles, who has played football. Again, he hasn't played as much perhaps as he would have wanted to. But you're looking at a player that scored 57 goals in just under 150 games for Bolton. He's been a really key figure. He's scored 7 goals and 3 assists this season, but he's only played 60% of their league minutes, but he's contributed to 28% of Bolton's goals. So you look at these facts and you think, wow, they've got a big player on their hand. And then, as you say, alongside Joe Taylor, again, with the £3 million fee there, I expect a lot of that will be add-ons if they get promoted. But it's still a massive amount of money to be spent in League One. And in any ordinary season, it would create massive headlines when you've got them. I don't want to go into all the money that Birmingham spend because it gets brought up all the time. But it is not a drop in the ocean, but it is comparatively a lot less than they have spent. But it is still very, very big money for the third tier of English football. But you look at his record over the last couple of last season with Colchester and then with Lincoln, and he did take a little bit of time to get going. He missed a couple of chances for for Lincoln early on, but when the goals came, they did come, and in some numbers. I think he finished top goal scorer at Colchester and at Lincoln. Playing half a season for both is pretty impressive, in all honesty. So I think this is huge for Huddersfield, and it will give them what they need to go and get promoted this season.
Yep, very good. Okay, well, that's the big news from the week. What we're now going to do is look ahead to the weekend and see what's coming up. And we are going to start with an absolute humdinger in the Championship. Now, in terms of league position, it's probably not the biggest game. 21st versus 12th. It's average, mid-table versus a relegation threatened side. But when you consider this is the English Football League, and probably the biggest game of the weekend involves two Welsh sides. Cardiff City in 21st, still relegation haunted. Yet again, don't seem to be able to pull themselves away from that season after season. Swansea City looking up the table rather than down the table. This is a massive game. The Bluebirds have had a solid, if not spectacular, start to 2025. But can they take confidence, Kyle, from their recent FA Cup victory over promotion hopefuls Sheffield United?
Yeah, definitely. I think they can do. It was a weird night. I wasn't at Bramall Lane last week, but I think there was just over 6,000 fans there for an FA Cup game, which is a completely separate conversation about the FA Cup and how the third rounders turn into that. But yeah, they became a 20-place gap. I know it's two Championship sides, but they were both in completely different. Well, they both have completely different aspirations for the season, so it did feel a bit of a turning point. It was the first win of the year. They've had a couple of draws. Just before that, they drew in midweek against Watford. So Coventry and Middlesbrough were the two games before that they've drawn at the start of the year. So they are struggling to get over the line in terms of winning games, which is why they are still in a little bit of trouble. But they have improved a fair bit this year. You look at last year when Mauriza had come in and was given the job permanently, but they really, really struggled, and they gave him the job in a moment when they were actually really struggling for any sort of result, and they still struggled throughout December up until they beat Watford at the end of the year. And then, as I say, they've drawn a couple since, got another point against Watford, and it does feel a little bit of a better situation there at Cardiff now. And derby game, you know how they are, and the cliches that get brought out and form going out the window. But Cardiff will be confident that they've gone into it in decent enough form, as you say, not particularly spectacular as of yet, but hopefully this can be the start of a run the season, go on and pick up a few more wins instead of drawing a couple of games, and hopefully can stop looking over their shoulder in a little while.
Yeah, of course. Now, when we look at the visitors, actually, the FA Cup for them certainly didn't provide anything positive at all. So they had hit a big setback in their push for the top six recently, and then they crashed out of the cup in dismal style. Are they on a downer, and how does that affect the mood in Luke Williams' camp before this huge derby?
Yeah, I think it affects it massively. You look at a couple of their recent results. They've conceded 3 goals against Southampton. Remember, this is a Southampton side who have struggled massively. For the first time, everyone says it every year about a team in the Premier League that might go on and break Derby's points record, but they are. I still don't think it'll happen, but Southampton are in danger of that. And to go and lose there 3-0, I know it's the FA Cup, and granted, I think Southampton made fewer changes than Swansea did, but it's more so the fact that they got hammered by Portsmouth on New Year's Day. They did take a decent point against West Brom, but it did require a late Joe Allen equaliser that day, and I think West Brom were the better side and perhaps should have finished them off before giving them the chance to equalise late on. They are still fairly in touch with the playoffs. There's a 7-point gap, but it does feel that they've been too inconsistent. If you look at a couple of their games before Christmas, they had 2 wins and then 2 losses, so it does feel that they can't really string a run of results together that will give them the momentum needed to get into the top 6 this season. But the teams that are currently outside the top 6, you have Watford, who are on a bit of poor form. You have a look at Sheffield Wednesday, we've mentioned, and all the problems that seem to happen there, despite the fact that they have had a really good season. So there is always a chance, and if you're gonna go and kickstart your season and try and get back into contention for a place in the top 6, why not do it against your biggest rivals? It is the perfect opportunity for Swansea to go and get something this weekend, and then use that momentum going forward.
Yeah, now I actually remember the Cardiff Swansea derby, and I'm showing my age here, but I do have a good memory for even as a young person. I remember them playing each other in 85, 86, and they were both relegated out of the third division, the old third division, along with Wolves and Lincoln. And then in 86, 87, my first two of my first three home games were Lincoln Cardiff and Lincoln Swansea. We beat Swansea 4-0. So they do have a history that goes through all of the divisions. They've played in the fourth division, the third division, the Championship. I don't think they've ever met in the Premier League, but I may be wrong. But the visitors have got the greater head-to-head, something like 32 wins to 23 wins, I think, across all competitions. And they've won 8 of the last 12 meetings. Do you see history repeating itself?
Yeah, in all honesty, I'm not certain how this one goes on Saturday. I believe they have met in the Premier League. The game earlier on this season was a 1-1 draw. I'm literally just trying to find it now.
They have, yeah.
23rd, yes,
23rd,
yeah, it
14.
was. Yeah, it was a Premier League meeting for a season. But yeah, as you say there, the head-to-head had definitely been one-sided in recent years. But when you compare the two forms, as you say, looking ahead to this game, it does feel a really difficult one to call, and I do feel that it has got another draw written all over it this season.
Well, I don't do the predictions because I am merely the presenter, not the pundit. So we'll leave that with you, and you can sit on the fence, get splinters on your bum, and we will drop down a division, which Cardiff will be hoping they don't do at the end of this season. We're going to drop down, but we're not going to go too far away from Wales, just across the bridge to Bristol Rovers. Now they're 20th in League One at the moment. They pulled the trigger on their manager. They're one of the teams, I think, that have spent relatively big, 500,000 on Promise on Cherry from Fleetwood in the summer. So they certainly were looking up the table rather than down. They're now looking nervously over their shoulder. And it could be a real tough afternoon for them. They're playing Darrell Clark's Barnsley. They're 5th in division. Now, Barnsley were one of the sides I personally thought would struggle this year. I didn't see Darrell Clark being a success at Barnsley. He was certainly a success at Bristol Rovers after joining them from Salisbury. He got them back out of the National League and probably spurred them on through into League One. So he's been a big part of their recent history. Now, the Gas have struggled in recent weeks, but they got a much-needed win 2 weekends ago over Cambridge United. And the gap between them and the bottom 4 now stands at 5 points. Do you think they can record back-to-back league victories for only the second time this season and further ease those relegation worries?
In a word, no, I do not see this on Saturday. In all honesty, I will not sit on the fence when I perhaps do my prediction in a couple of minutes. No, in all seriousness, I do not think that the Bristol Rovers will win this game. That is more so to do with Barnsley, in all honesty, than Bristol Rovers. But we will look at the Gas first. That win against Cambridge was absolutely massive. It was a really big weekend, actually, in League One, as you say, a couple of weekends ago. And that gap has now opened up quite significantly between the sides in the bottom 4 and the sides just outside. That 5-point gap does feel a really big marker now for Bristol Rovers. And it would be great if they could go and record another league success this weekend. But as I say, we'll come on to in a minute, Barnsley are an excellent side. So Matt Taylor was sacked 16th of December, just after a loss to Birmingham. They had a really, really poor run of form. If you look actually in between, so they beat Mansfield in mid-November, 23rd of November, I've got here. If you look in between the game against Shrewsbury, which was back in October, and the Cambridge game, they were 1 win in 12. During that time, only Peterborough picked up fewer points, and they're 9 in that time. They scored just 7 goals in them 12 games, which is the joint fewest in the division. So it really, really struggled. I think the sacking of Matt Taylor was something that a lot of people had seen come in. And they then took a late point against Wrexham just before Christmas. Lost to Exeter on Boxing Day, and then lost 3-0 against Stevenage on the 29th of December. So it was a really, really tough Christmas for Bristol Rovers. The game against Leyton Orient on the 1st of January, a little bit different. You had a really good Leyton Orient side who just knocked out Derby out of the FA Cup on Tuesday night, so perhaps a little more expected, and it was a narrow loss there. But as I said, that game against Cambridge, beating them by only a single goal, but no matter, was absolutely huge. That 5-point gap, as I say, feels really, really big now. And then they had a nice little, I want to say day out, but it doesn't even feel like that because Bristol Rovers were playing Ipswich in a league game a couple of seasons ago, but they were well beaten, perhaps unsurprisingly, at at the weekend and are out of the FA Cup, but they certainly have their sights set on staying in League One this season. So, yeah, I cannot see a Bristol Rovers result this weekend, unfortunately, but I do feel they will be more than safe in terms of staying in League One for the rest of the season.
Yeah, of course, the reason you do not see a result is Barnsley are the opposition, the third best away side in the division. They've had 2 failed playoff attempts. Can they make it third time lucky and return to the Championship, albeit probably through the playoffs once again?
Well, if they are in the playoffs this season, I don't think they'll be playing Bolton, the side who they've faced in both the last 2 seasons, but I do not see Bolton inside the playoffs this time around. Barnsley have been on a really good run. They've 4 wins in a row now, and it did come a bit of a surprise. They had a game before Christmas when they lost 4-0 against Leyton Orient, and I think it was at the start of Orient's revival. But it did feel a bit of a shock. Barnsley have been particularly poor at home. They are, as you say, very, very good away from home. But losing 4-0 in the style and in the manner and everything around it just felt a really big result in Barnsley's season, and you wondered where they would go from there and whether there might be a managerial change even or something like that. But they've responded really, really well. They beat Bolton on Boxing Day. They beat Peterborough, 2 teams that are, you would say, are fairly established in this sort of division, and both, at least at the start of the season, would have had aspirations of being in and around the top 10. Beat Wrexham on New Year's Day at home, and then beat Crawley 3-0. Both quite convincing wins, in all honesty. So it does feel now that they are suddenly back in the conversation again for the top 6. And it does feel a big game for them, again, as we say, away from home and how good they have been on the road. It feels really, really big, this one. And if they can go and get a result, they've got a couple more good games coming up for the rest of the month in terms of games that they would expect to win. And who knows? It does feel like they're on the cusp of the sides at the moment that I'd like to say the best of the rest in terms of you cut away from the top 4. But if they can pick up a couple of wins in the next few results, then who knows? This is the beauty of League One. You only need a couple of results to turn your season around, as we've seen with Barnsley, and a couple more wins could propel them into automatic promotion contention. And as we say, if you look at the fact that Wycombe have lost their manager and how they go from there, Wycombe and Barnsley do meet on the 28th of January, so that game could potentially, who knows at the moment what it will mean, but in a couple of weeks this could be a really, really big game in terms of the automatic promotion race. Perhaps getting a little ahead of where Barnsley are at the moment, and they'll just want to maintain their spot inside the top 6. But who knows? As I say, it's the beauty of League One, and I do see Barnsley winning this one and giving themselves another 3 points and getting further inside the top 6, and I think they'll win it in fairly convincing fashion.
Now, if they do win it, that will give them a very narrow edge in the head-to-head in the league, because at the moment, head-to-head, Bristol Rovers have won 12 of their encounters, Barnsley have won 12, and there have been 11 draws. So if it's a draw, it will be dead even right the way across. But Barnsley have won 2 FA Cup games, but they did not win the FA Cup game earlier this season when Bristol Rovers beat them on penalties after a 0-0 draw. So we've had 2 games where there's a team vying for promotion and a team battling relegation. So to make it a hat trick of teams at the top versus teams at the bottom, we'll drop into League 2 and we'll pick up a team I've got a real soft spot for. AFC Wimbledon, 5th in the table, playing Tranmere, who are 22nd. Now, Wimbledon haven't played since January the 2nd. They missed a huge chunk of the season earlier due to the Plough Lane pitch being flooded and collapsing, so they had games in hand. They still sit 5th in League 2. Do you think they can go put a statement of intent out on Saturday, get some more points on the board and really have League 2 to sit up and take note?
Yeah, I certainly think they can. If you look at last weekend in League 2, I think there was only the one game played, which was Walsall beating Tranmere, incidentally. So it wasn't a massive surprise they didn't play. And then the weekend before, this is where the new Sky Sports deal was perhaps paid its price in terms of the fact that the game that Wimbledon were meant to be playing that weekend may have been on had it been on the Saturday, but as a knock-on effect of games being televised over Christmas, they then played on the Thursday night and then were meant to play on the Sunday. And as I say, it got called off. They're on a really good run since losing to leaders Walsall, 23rd of November, that game was. They've only lost 1 game in 8, which was against Chesterfield, a side that you would expect to be in and around the playoffs at the end of the season. If not automatic promotion, given how the table is looking at the moment, because it is a really tight top end of League 2. bar Walsall, who are home and away from everyone else and look certain to be playing in League One for the rest of the season. For next season. So the margin of victories, though, that I'd like to point up on in recent weeks, there's been quite a few really close games. So they had a 2-1 win against Newport, as I say, that last game. Beating Gillingham 1-0, Doncaster 1-0. Again, a team that you would expect to be fighting for automatic promotion. Only really the 3-0 win against Harrogate, which felt a comfortable result. And they're a really, really good side at home at Wimbledon. They've got the fourth best home record in the division. They have drawn a couple of games recently, so 3 draws in 6. They've only lost twice all season at home. Only leaders Walsall scored more than their 22, and their 9 goals conceded is the second best at home. So in terms of looking at this game, it does feel very one-sided. In a minute, we'll get on to the problems at Tranmere. But purely looking from an AFC Wimbledon perspective, a home game, you do feel that they will have enough to get 3 points at the weekend and perhaps move into the top 3 in League Two.
Yep. So we'll look now at Tranmere. Now, Nigel Adkins did a brilliant job, however many years ago it was now at Scunthorpe. Who needs Mourinho? We've got our physio. We'll remember the chants. Hated it because it's Scunthorpe United, who are now a non-league team. For kids of a certain age, Scunthorpe United were once in the league. They were once a decent side, but they're not now. They're awful. But they remain in real danger. Tranmere, that is, not Scunthorpe United, at the bottom of League Two. They're 22nd in the table. Is Nigel Adkins still the right man for the job? They're a big club.
Well, he certainly backed himself. He insisted just before they played Carlisle that he was definitely the right man to take them forward. And they picked up a really big win that day. And it felt even bigger given the fact they just lost 2-0 to Morecambe. And the alarm bells, I think, at that point were ringing. They were only 2 points clear after that loss. Playing both of the bottom 2, though, gave them a really big chance to at least pick up some points. And as you say, only winning one of them games does feel a little disappointing, I guess, on paper. So the gap's now 5 points to Morecambe. So there's 4 sides level on 25 points, so Tranmere and 3 other teams. They're only 3 points behind Barrow in 15th, which kind of, when you talk about the top of League Two and how close it is and the fact that Walsall are so far ahead, and then you've got teams at the bottom now, as I say, you Morecambe and you Carlisle that are now 5 points and 7 points, I believe, cut adrift. It means that the majority of the table is really close together, and that perhaps proves it that you've got a team sat in 22nd. They're only 3 points behind a team sat in 15th. Unfortunately, though, I do not see Tranmere getting anything. They have the worst away record in League Two. They've lost their last 6 in a row, so this feels very, very one-sided going into the game. They've only taken 8 points from their 12 away games all season. They've not got a positive away result since beating Bromley on the 19th of October, and they were hammered 5-1 away against leaders Walsall. Again, granted, they're playing the best side in League Two and probably a side that will be playing League One football next season. I don't think you need to... I need to think twice about saying that, to be honest. So, yeah, on paper at least, this looks like a home win very comfortably. But it is League Two. Who knows what will happen? This is the beauty of football. If Wimbledon were just given the God-given right to win this game, then there'd be no point playing the game. So if Tranmere can keep it tight and hopefully keep the score down in terms of conceding, they might nick a goal, and then who knows? This is League Two. It's the beauty of it.
So we're talking about head-to-head. Hazard a guess which of these 2 teams comes out best in the head-to-head, bearing in mind we are talking about new Wimbledon, not old Wimbledon.
Tranmere.
It's Wimbledon. Wimbledon have won 3 of their meetings, or they've all been league meetings. Wimbledon have won 3. There've been 3 draws, and Tranmere have won 2. Tranmere won last year 3-2 after Wimbledon had a man sent off, but Wimbledon won 4-1 after Tranmere had a man sent off. This season, it was a 2-0 victory for Wimbledon on the 26th of November. Kyle, thank you very much once again for your input. Any games on the horizon for you this weekend?
I've actually got quite a quiet weekend, in all honesty. I think I'm watching my brother play on Saturday. He plays for Lincoln Under-18s, and they are playing Bolton, which is a big game in the Under-18s league. But no, in terms of that, I had a very busy weekend last weekend. So perhaps for once in my life, it will be quite nice to have a weekend where there is not a lot of football. And then I'm back off to Sheffield on Sunday, and then I'm sure I will resume watching plenty of football when I'm back at uni.
Fantastic. Well, I did see you briefly at Lincoln and Bolton on Tuesday night. You walked up past me while I was already in the stands. I shall be at Sixfields this weekend to watch City and Northampton, so we'll see how that goes. Kyle, thank you very much. Ladies, gentlemen, boys and girls, thank you for watching. This was the Real EFL Preview Show. Please remember, if you do enjoy the show, hit like, hit subscribe, and tell your friends. We will be back next week with more great EFL content. In the meantime, thank you for watching.